Good evening. It is Thursday, March 9th. It is 5 p.m. on the dot. Welcome to Phillip Edward Alexander Live. Today, we are going to be dealing with an issue that we've promised to have addressed on this show. This is going to be a very informative show, a very eye-opening show, and I strongly suggest that you share this with as many people as possible. Good afternoon, those of you picking us up live. Hello to those of you picking us up on any rerun. Today, we are dealing with the issue of, I don't want to say Trinidad's handling because it might devolve into the global handling, but a lot of what we're going to focus on is our country's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. I have a document that I received. This document that I received is the performance appraisal of the National COVID-19 Response Team's pandemic management, and it's a call to revoke national awards. It's a very serious document, and I've been told that it's been served on senior public office holders, including the Chief Justice and I think the DPP. I am going to be joined online by my brother, Dr. Paul Elias Alexander, and as soon as he is in, they will bring him in. Satish and David will bring him in. But I'm joined in studio by Dr. Rajiv Siriran, and he is a nutrition, diabetes, and public health specialist. Good day,
Hi.
Dr. Siriran.
Good afternoon, Phillip.
And that camera is yours. So when you're saying hello to the audience, look into that. And I'm also joined by Dr. Feroz Omadeen, cardiologist. Any of those two cameras are yours. Gentlemen, while I am waiting for my brother, I just want to read the opening page that is a letter to the Honorable Chief Justice referencing immediate revocation of awards to the National COVID-19 Response Team. Is an open letter. Dear Sir, for public health strategists, the novel exigencies of the COVID-19 pandemic demanded innovative, adaptable, and evidence-based decision-making. Granted that the National COVID-19 Response Team, NCRT, was ostensibly following World Health Organization's The Science, over time it became obvious that the NCRT was making decisions which were increasingly ham-fisted, untimely, and out of touch with actual science, epidemiology, virology, vaccinology, and clinical medicine. In policy development, the NCRT appeared bereft of volition, bioethics, and clinical acumen. Considering the country's unacceptable COVID-19 mortality rate per capita, it is immediately obvious that the NCRT failed its prime objective. However, the collateral damage inflicted on the economy and society by the NCRT's reckless policies are an equal indictment. The accompanying performance appraisal of the NCRT's management of COVID-19 not only addresses the country's anomalous fatality rate overlooked by the previous report commissioned by the government, it also highlights the manifold failures of the NCRT, which amounted to an unprecedented assault on fundamental human rights and freedoms. Summarily, the NCRT's policy and practice failures are detailed under 6 headings presented within this section: findings, offenses, and oversights. 1. Failure in clinical due diligence and patient care. 2. Public communication failures and data obfuscation. 3. Unscientific, repressive, and ineffective policy guidance. 4. Dereliction of ethical oversight for emergency use authorized COVID-19 vaccines. 5. False advertising. 6. Endangerment of children. Based on the appraisal, it is our considered opinion that the recommendation of the individuals comprising the NCRT for meritorious recognition was a grave miscalculation, and these awards should be rescinded forthwith. The egregious failures demand immediate scrutiny by the awards committee and rightful condemnation by the public. This is a matter of national concern, which profoundly undermines the integrity and distinction of our national awards. The committee should not be drawn into any prize-giving spectacle that deflects condemnation of the NCRT's failures, and it should not assume that the public is ignorant of or indifferent to this travesty. We urge you to give careful consideration to our request. Now, I understand how levers work, and this is obviously a lever to get into the actual conversation of the National COVID Response Team's handling of the pandemic in Trinidad and Tobago. We had the ignoble reality of being at one time the best in the world and then followed by being the worst in the world. So at some point, this country is going to have to investigate itself and its handling of the pandemic. I want to hand over to Dr. Siriram. He's been frontline in defense of the children, most notably, and I remember him for that outside the Ministry of Education when they were trying to vaccinate the children. Dr. Siriram, what's your take on this?
Thanks, Philip. Well, I have to say that's a very a strong opening and a very strongly worded document. And I've had the honor and the pleasure of contributing some data to that document as well. And I see that it is prepared, and it has been prepared by civil society and the labor. So, but somebody has to open this Pandora's box. I think that we should be in a state of reflection, and in a sense mourning from what we have gone through. The thing is that we are in a post-pandemic reality, and we're talking about unemployment, we're talking about the state of the economy, and just today I was looking at the news, and we were looking at violence in schools and so on. And we have to understand as a society how all of this relates to the pandemic, it relates to COVID, but it also relates to the management, or some may say the mismanagement of COVID. Yeah. Now, really, when I came into this foray, and it has turned into a bit of a foray, we took a stance, myself and several other physicians, we took a very strong stance objecting to mass vaccination of children. And it's a contentious one. Internationally, there's a lot of contention around it. But I think that ethically, it was absolutely wrong. And when we realized that the children's education hung in the balance and was contingent on the acceptance of the vaccine, in this case the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine in the adolescents, who were threatened to have their access to schools, their in-person access to schools revoked unless they submitted to the vaccine. And I, being a father myself, I have 2 kids, I said, no, we couldn't let this incursion move into the primary school population, and I said, no, I took a stance. So I think that was a major turning point for us as a society. It got us thinking a little bit about the bioethics of the vaccine rollout, also about pharmaceutical safety, and I think overall as a society, maybe we made the right choice in protecting the younger children from exposure to what I would deem products that are still investigational in nature, at least protecting our children from that. However, I have to say that tens of thousands of children have been exposed to the same vaccine mRNA product, and many young men as well. And perhaps as the conversation goes along, what we should be looking at is whether it was right to administer these products without voluntary informed consent, and how we as a society could have responded in a more ethical manner, preserving freedoms, preserving the right to choose, preserving the right to refuse, and also ensuring that there's some truth in messaging and truth in advertising, particularly when it comes to the pandemic products, meaning vaccines and other things like remdesivir and so on.
I remember my brother, when he got into that conversation globally, and he was speaking to, I think it was the Oversight Committee in the United States, and he said to them, if you think that your vaccine is safe for children, put liability back on the table. And that was a very rational thing to say. That if you thought that it was safe for children to use, why then are you not accepting liability for any problems that may arise? with your product. And that statement eclipsed it for a lot of us, and we understood it then. That if you are pushing something on us to the point where you took away our human rights and you said vaccinate to educate and vaccinate to work and vaccinate to entertain, if you are saying that and you're forcing it on people, as you said, you removed informed consent. If you're forcing it on people, at least have the decency to accept liability for your product in case it doesn't work the way you say it does.
Yeah, I think it was a very difficult position that the medical fraternity was in, because we were facing a dangerous virus, a novel pathogen, and particularly depending on the variant, the outcomes could be pretty bad. And we had a lot of patients going into acute lung injury and respiratory failure, and we had to do something. The medical fraternity has to act, and of course the convention is that prophylactics like vaccines are the solution, and they are always safe and effective. And it was really in the labeling of that particular product, even though it was an investigational medicinal product, it was a new biotechnology, just in the labeling it was a sleight of hand. Just by labeling it a vaccine meant that it became heresy for anybody to question safety or to get into any bioethics conversation about it.
I saw that. It became anybody who was questioning that, we all became anti-vaxxers all of a sudden, and none of us were. We weren't anti-vaxxers. We understood and support vaccines and the work vaccines do, but those were vaccines that have had years in the public space, and we knew what were the what could be outcomes, undesired outcomes. One of the things that a lot of the problems that seem to be arising were heart conditions. People were getting heart conditions, and that is why I asked Dr. Omardine to join us as a cardiologist, if he could weigh in on that aspect of the thing. Did you, as a cardiologist, post or during and post COVID, notice an increase in the amount of heart conditions, especially among the vaccinated community?
Can I return to your question in a split second?
Sure.
I just want to say that by appearing on this program, I hope that people, your viewers, don't make the assumption that I support everything in this document.
Not at all. This document came today, and I read the opening of the document. That is not to say that this panel agrees.
Good. So while I do agree with much of it, by the way, but I see these awards as just politics, and I think it's almost irrelevant to the future of Trinidad.
But that's why I said, to close that, I said that I understand how levers work, and that if you use a lever here to dislodge national awards, then you're going to force a conversation. And the people who want a conversation on Trinidad's handling of COVID-19 want to get into the conversation. You're going to need a response from the state, and this could be a response. And I think that is the reason for the avenue. We ourselves, our organization, have served freedom of information requests on the state, and we are still waiting on responses to those freedom of information requests, specifically asking for the mortality rates among the vaccinated, because that will give us the answers that we need.
No, that is far more complicated. That's not going to give us the answers we need. The answers that we need will probably be buried forever and ever. We'll never know them.
Statistically, we knew that people of a certain age and that people of a certain weight, people who had comorbidities, that came into the conversation early, and we understood that overweight people, the very elderly, and people who had any underlying serious conditions were at increased risk. We knew that. But we have situations where young, strong, healthy people are dropping dead.
Dr. Omardine, can I give a little insight into my own observation of COVID and my own experiences?
Sorry, but I promise I'll come back to the
I'm going to make sure you remember.
We bandy about the word.
Dr. Siriram, I apologize. I just want to bring my brother in.
Yeah.
Dr. Paul Elias Alexander. Paul, if you're seeing us, Dr. Omar Dean and Dr. Siriram are here with us.
I'm not seeing you.
All right, Satish will sort that out with you, but we're seeing you. You could say your greetings, and then I want to pass it back to Dr. Siriram to continue with his contribution, and we come back to you right after.
So I can speak?
Yeah, you can speak.
Well, look, I'm getting a little echo in the back from you guys, but like I can hear my voice, but let me just say, thanks. I'm privileged to be on your show today, and these esteemed experts, scientists, doctors, and we're having a very important discussion. So, I will speak from the United States experience and the Canadian experience, and more from a epidemiological and public health point of view. And I will just leave it right there. You know my background, you know my education: University of Toronto, Oxford, McMaster in evidence-based medicine, and I worked as an epidemiologist in the Canadian government for about 12 years. I worked for WHO in Europe, 2008. I worked for WHO and PAHO in terms of this pandemic. And I also worked for the Trump administration as a pandemic advisor. I will hand it over to you this way. Had we done nothing in Canada, nothing in the United States, we'd have been in a much better situation than we are today. In other words, when we look at the situation in Canada and the United States principally, what we are realizing now is that the vast majority of people who died did not die from the virus. They died from the medical management, how they were handled in the hospitals in terms of the COVID protocol and the drugs and stuff that were used, and how the elderly, the vulnerable persons died because of the medical management. And now, what we are seeing is that now that we are dealing with Omicron, the XBB 1.5 clade, and that would be displaced very shortly too. It's very infectious, but very mild. Most of the people that are dying in Canada, or let's say America, still are very elderly persons with underlying medical conditions, but not many. What we are seeing though is a drastic increase in deaths in young persons and middle-aged persons. And this virus at this stage does not kill young persons and middle-aged people who are healthy. So we are arguing that there's something to do with this vaccine. And that's where the discussion is right now in the United States, in Canada, in terms of the impact of the vaccine on the vaccinated persons. And I can hear my voice as I speak, so is there any way you can take that off?
You're coming across clear. I know Satish and David working on it. It'll have to be, it's because it's an international call. But I know they're going to work on it, and worst case scenario, they'll take you out and bring you back in and see if that solves it, right? So I know they're working on that. But following on what he said, if you could, Dr. Sriram, if you could give way so that I could put the question back to Dr. Omarin, because did you see an increase?
Well, I can't say that I actually saw an increase in either myocarditis or coronary disease in my little practice, but my practice is small. There's really no way to judge that. So I don't think, I mean, possibly if you ask people who work in the emergency rooms in the public sector, they may be able to give you an opinion on that, but I wouldn't trust that either, as Paul himself knows. These things, these are anecdotal things, or what doctors say. Really, you need hard statistics to think. So,
so as a cardiologist, you don't get that data?
No, we get no blinking data or data. It's just I do. First of all, this is a very complex situation. I've lost my faith in a lot of things over the past 3 years.
Yeah.
I've unfortunately lost a lot of my faith in the medical profession, and I still respect doctors for what they are, you know. But more disturbingly, I've lost my faith, of course, in the media. It's complete waste of time trying to listen to the media to understand what's happening. But the medical reporting system, the journal system that is supposed to be sort of a safeguard of, you know, a filter for our information, I think it's let us down. We don't have good data. We have widely conflicting reports from all sorts of different researchers and sources, half of them who I just no longer believe. I think they tell lies in the medical literature. This is the sad truth of it. I'm simplifying it.
Serious.
Of course it is.
Serious and scathing indictment.
No, it's been going on long before COVID.
No. You just said that you have a small practice. I want to say to Trinidad and Tobago who don't know you that you are widely respected in the field. So for you to say that the data that you were given or the information that you were given wasn't guiding you.
We weren't given information on what myocarditis. We can't get information on myocarditis. Have we had access to, say, Trinidad and Tobago's myocarditis figures? And in any case, I wouldn't believe it. I'm sure Paul wouldn't believe it because the statistical methods used to analyze it probably aren't valid. So statistics are really, really complex things. Doctors are not trained in understanding statistics. Most of us. Maybe, look, these two guys are very smart and they're much smarter than me. So I would defer to their opinion on this. But doctors aren't trained in understanding statistics. We're not even trained properly in medical research. We're not trained to analyze what is a good study and what isn't. Unfortunately, there's a lot more to be said about doctors, but I'm one of them, and I don't think I'm capable. The COVID has really reinforced this point. I knew it before COVID, but I can't very sensibly analyze medical research and make a conclusion as to whether it's good or bad. I'm sorry, that's the truth. And frankly, I think that 95% of doctors, if not more in Trinidad, are in the same boat. I'm just the honest one, or the one who realizes what he.
So you're flying. So when you during the COVID, and I'm gonna put a question just like this, because you all are the medical professionals. During COVID-19, all medical professionals were expecting to be updated in ways that they could answer intelligently the mass panic. You just said the media was giving information based on the media's own agenda or whatever they were trying to sell, because it had nothing to do with fact. I had a long-running online conversation with a journalist who was using population size as opposed to percentage of population to determine the size and scope of the thing, and my brother was trying to get everybody to understand that there are people at risk and there is a danger here, but it is not a mad danger that should have shut down the economy. And you, as a professional, a specialist, who, when we realized that a lot of the first response, and I remember we dealt with a young man who was in, I think, Form 2 and Form 3, and his father was begging my brother to help him find a way to treat with his son's heart that responded negatively to a vaccine. The entire country coming out of this has to reflect, it has to analyze how we managed it. Because if we put people in danger, if we put people at risk managing overcompensating, overcorrecting. And we were saying that since March 2020. If we put people at risk, overcompensating, overcorrecting, because, and again, I remember it was the mishandling of SARS, and that is what was said that forced them to try and overcorrect with their handling of COVID-19, and it just took on a life of its own. But if we put people at risk, how do people trust the state and public health again? Should anything else like this
certainly
happen?
we should not trust the state, and frankly, we should not trust public health anymore. I've lost my faith in public health. It's as simple as that. Now, these things, these are complex issues. Huh? It's hard if you want sound bites. I can't give you sound bites, but you're dealing with massive complexity here. Okay. Let's just I think the issues that you're talking about are not confined to Trinidad. Eh? This thing happened all over the world.
But we are practicing in Trinidad, and some things concerned you sufficiently to the point that you're here speaking out. Not every medical practitioner or doctor in this country is as courageous and would stand up and speak out like that. This moved you enough to force you into this situation. So I'm not looking for sound bites, but I'm actually looking, like every other citizen, to hear you all guide us so that we're clear in the future.
Okay. Well, Philip, if I may interject, you're right, Dr. Umardeen. We have a dearth of data internationally and certainly here, right? And in July 2021, we had written a letter. Now, this is actually my document, right? In that time, I wrote a letter to the medical board asking for ethical conduct in the vaccine rollout. And what we did at that time, we told them, well, listen, we're in a very, very tough position here. It's a rock and a hard place, right? We are facing a novel virus, and trust me, on the front line, it's pretty scary, all right? You can have young persons developing respiratory failure. Even young persons in their 30s, even in their 20s. I even had people in their teens and so on. They had acute lung injury, okay? So we are trying to find a solution to this, and we got to try anything. And yes, certainly vaccines are part of it. But we emphasized to the medical board, and I sent this to the medical board, and I said, listen, if we are going to use novel medical products, which just have about 4 months of safety and efficacy data, it's not a problem. We got to try something, but you must set up a vaccine adverse events reporting system, a VAERS system. You must, and you also must set up a database so that the public can see what is happening in terms of adverse events. We should also have a registry for deaths and deaths according to age. So, for example, if you look at the UK and so on, we have an increase in excess mortality in young persons. We have an increase in excess deaths in persons under 30. And this is happening internationally. Of course, in Trinidad and Tobago, even though we appealed to the medical board,
vaccinated,
this is the whole problem. This is the whole problem. We don't know.
We'll never know.
We don't know because they are not disaggregating the statistics.
Capture that data.
They are not reporting the data because they feel that if the data were to show that it is somehow related to the vaccine or not, they are frightened to even broach the issue because then it will drive what you call vaccine hesitancy. Vaccine hesitancy. So when they look at that data, they say, let us disaggregate it. Why is it that not during the pandemic, but 1 to 2 years after mass rollout, why is it that we're having younger persons suffering with cardiac events? If you look at Israel, there's a study that came out recently, Sun et al. In Israel, there's a 25% increase in accident and emergency admissions for cardiac events, including for fatal cardiac events, heart attacks. 25% increase in persons 16 to 39 years. That's Sun et al. This data is there. We have the data, it's there, but where you're not seeing it in mainstream press. You're not seeing it covered in any press, not in the Western press, not down here. Even though this is very important data. 25% increase in cardiac events, including fatal cardiac events in that age group, right?
But Rajiv, this data is very hard to interpret. It's 25% relative risk increase, but it's a very, very small numbers. These are emergency calls for young people,
for young persons.
There's a very few. So you know, absolute risk would be very, very small.
But a statistical percentage of 25 to 30% is big.
Actually,
that's
well, if you look, cardiac events don't usually typically happen in persons in 20.
Exactly.
They don't typically happen.
So
right?
We're dealing with very small numbers.
That's right. But if you have a 25%
it should be an alarm bell.
We should know. What we should do is we should investigate it. This should be investigated. So what we should be looking at, we should be doing postmortems. We should be doing postmortems.
Correct.
Right? The postmortems that are coming out, there's more data coming out, of course. There was a German study that came out, Schwab and they looked at it and they said, well, okay, they're trying to find a mechanism between the potential vaccine exposure or spike protein and injury in the myocardium. And they are seeing that there's a potential link between that. They're seeing that there's a potential deposit of spike protein in the heart which can lead to inflammatory infiltrates in the heart. Now, the question is, with what frequency is this happening? Is this happening very frequently? Is this a minority? We don't know.
Yes.
What we need...
But you can't not know if the information is there. So why aren't they giving us that?
Well, the question is, why aren't we studying this in detail? Why aren't we studying this, right? If you look at this is a print I just put out here. This is from PAHO. Wear a mask. The COVID-19 pandemic. This came out yesterday. The pandemic is not over yet. It is still a threat. COVID-19 is making people severely ill. Get vaccinated, right? This is coming out from PAHO right in Trinidad here.
Can we discuss this in some detail tonight? Because maybe we should spend the whole night
talking about you have time to talk about that.
So the question is, why is this?
This is a real useful thing for the audience.
You have time to talk about that.
This is absolute nonsense.
We just put tens of thousands of people in each other's face for 2 months.
No, but
Carnival.
then, but
if that is a reality, in Trinidad, did it pause on the 25th of December and start back on Ash Wednesday? For us to now be putting that out, when you look at the scenes at the carnival events, if that is the truth, then the government misled the population with the safety of carnival. Which is it?
The government knows, and we all know, that Omicron is not a threat. Omicron, the current XBB 1.5 variant, is very, very contagious. It's more contagious than the BA5 variant. Maybe up to 5 to 10 persons will be infected per person. Okay? The figures that we're getting from the Ministry of Health obviously is a gross underestimate of the number of cases. In fact, I can read the statistics here. I have the statistics here, right? The fact is that the masking, we just had a Cochrane review came out, a Cochrane review on masking and the effectiveness on community masking, and it's a wash. It was dependent principally on the Bangladesh study. The Bangladesh study showed that yes, whilst you can recommend the use of community masking and so on, it can increase masking significantly, but it does not have a statistically significant impact on the transmission of COVID. It doesn't have a statistically significant impact if you try to mask people. So the fact is that if you look at all of these pictures,
so you're saying that
you will see.
They said you're free to carry on with a fool's errand. Because it's not going to...
Well, no, because this has an impact on our state of anxiety. This has a massive impact.
Not on COVID.
Not on COVID. Community masking in this way, I'm not saying that masks do not have any impact, you know. If I wear a mask routinely in seeing COVID patients, I must wear a properly sealed N95 mask. A properly sealed N95 mask. But on the whole, I minimize my exposure to that mask, because I also know it carries with it certain risks and certain discomforts. So, in fact, if you look at that type of mask, yes, it is functional, but you cannot enforce those kinds of masks. It is not healthy. It is not healthy for the person's psyche. It is not healthy for the upper respiratory tract, and it is not healthy for communication either. It has a lot of negative impacts. And the fact is that our children in Trinidad and Tobago, if you look at internationally, we are one of the few countries that continue to enforce masking on our children by a soft mandate through principals in the schools. And it is because of nonsense like this that is coming out from official bodies that is passing through the ministry, and the ministry continues to fearmonger the population.
Let's take this a little further. So the Cochrane analysis, which is sort of the last word, the final word up to this point, unless something dramatically changes, right? Paul can correct me if he disagrees, because he's actually an expert on this sort of statistical analysis. But the Cochrane review is conclusive. It's a meta-analysis of everything sensible over the past 3 years. Is showing that surgical masks and cloth masks are completely useless. Let me repeat that. Surgical masks and cloth masks are completely useless. And that is that is science. If you want to talk about following science, which we have never done from the beginning of this pandemic, we now could follow some kind of science, serious science, and say cloth masks and surgical masks are completely useless. The question of the N95, well, Rajiv has a point. The same analysis suggested there's an 11 to 18% reduction in transmission if you use presumably a tightly fitting N95. If I use a tightly fitting N95, it's not comfortable. It can't be comfortable because you have to be breathing through this thing.
And it leads to complications of its own.
Well, it might, yes. But at any rate, my point is if each person is infecting 5 other people, according to Rajiv here, then, okay, that means you're going to be infecting 4 people instead of 5. These variants are so infectious, some of the most infectious things known to humanity, these new variants. They're just going to spread like wildfire through the carnival or no carnival, mask or no mask, all of us going to get it. We're all going to be exposed to it, many of us subclinically. I still think it's 40% subclinical rate. So that means 40% of people who get COVID don't even know they have it. And then they go and spread it to another 5 people. So trying to stop these things is useless. There was a...
So shouldn't we have, and I want to bring Dr. Paul Alexander into this, because he was advocating this from the very start, that the sooner we develop herd immunity, the better we would be as a nation and as a world. Paul, you still there? You heard the comment on the issue
I'm
of
listening to you all.
Your position on herd immunity as opposed to the lockdowns and the masking.
Well, look. First of all, I have to praise Dr. Shivaram and Dr. Modine again, because I know they're experts in their fields, and I'm not trying to be more expertise than them. Dr. Modine said something that was important, that the clinicians in medical school, they don't get suitable or as much research methodology training or statistical analysis training, and it's very critical that scientists and doctors know how to read the medical literature. And my background training is in evidence-based medicine, in the sense that if you wrote a paper, a medical paper, and you submitted it to New England Journal of Medicine or Journal of the American Medical Association or BMJ or Lancet, I would get asked to review the methods or the statistics. So this is my area. And could you hear me?
We hear you clearly. Continue.
So the point I'm making is, look, when we look at all of the science today, we call it the body of evidence. And I know, like Dr. Shivaram understands me well. The body of evidence today tells us that none of the lockdowns anywhere in the entire world, none worked to curb transmission of death. None, nowhere. Not in America, in no state, in no city, not in Canada, nowhere. It was an abject failure. No school closure worked to curb transmission of death. No mask mandate. When we look at all of the data, curb transmission of death. No business closure, none of the COVID policies, none, zero, worked to curb transmission or death. We looked at every child that the CDC put up and said, this child, this young person died from COVID. My colleague, Dr. Marty McCarry, his group looked at each of the cases, the autopsies, everything. And we can conclusively say that across 3 years in the United States, not one healthy child got infected with COVID and died. Not one. Same data in Germany, same data in Sweden. COVID spared our children day one. The infection fatality rate in children 0 to 10, 0 to 11 years old, Ioannidis data, 0.0003%. Statistical zero. Same today. There's no change. Children do not get severely ill. Now I'm talking about healthy children. I want to say something here about the masks. What Dr. Modine just said. We examined the data carefully, and the blue surgical masks and the white masks are pure junk. They never worked. They will not work. They will never ever work for these respiratory viruses. You basically putting on a diaper on your face that never works. It's almost like a psychological crutch. You put that on. So what the ministry is doing there is very laughable and nonsensical, because the science, as Dr. Sriram said, is bulletproof. It's clear, very clear that these masks confer no protection. And except for the N95, and there are some recent studies that showed when they compared the surgical to the N95, there was no difference. So that raised a whole set of questions for us. That the N95 have to be properly fit, seal tested, as Sriram said. That's a big problem because most people can't wear that for too long in the hospital setting. Look, there was a study in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam around middle of 2021, and they looked at in the Delta outbreak at that point. Delta was predominant, and they looked at these nurses in Ho Chi Minh in this hospital. They locked the hospital down for about 2 weeks. There was outbreak. What they found, similar to a study by Shitrit in Israel and Hatimaki in Finland, they found that double vaccinated nurses, fully PPE'd, masks, shields, gongs, gloves, the whole works, still transmitted virus to their patients and to their other nurse colleagues. Number one, they found that double vaccinated nurses had much more virus in the nasopharyngeal passage, etc. So it showed us that very early on that this vaccine was not stopping infection, replication, or transmission. And we knew from about the middle of July, so about 4 or 5 months after it was rolled out, that it was dead. It was dead on arrival, and it has failed, basically complete on Omicron, because we enter negative effectiveness territory, and everybody who's been vaccinated is becoming infected. The problem that those scientists on your stage there and we have is that the vaccine itself is not protecting the upper areas. It's not protecting. We are seeing vaccinated people become highly infected and they're getting very sick. Number one. That's number two. Our argument is that the vaccine, because it does not confer protection, does not sterilize the virus, it is placing a suboptimal pressure on the virus. So much so that, I'll say it this way, if we want this to continue for 100 more years, we just need to keep vaccinating exactly the way we are, using these same failed mRNA shots. This will never end. We will have infectious variant after infectious variant. And the real question is, the real issue is almost as though the Caribbean people in Trinidad need to understand that basically with Omicron, we could say that the pandemic is done. It is what we are doing to the society with the lockdowns and the crazy procedures and the masks and the continual vaccinating to age groups that don't need the vaccine. That is the problem. And I am of the belief today, and I work with Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Harvey Risch, these people on a day-to-day basis, and we are bluntly calling for a complete cessation of the vaccine. We are saying that until it's properly safety tested, we need to pull it from the market because the harms outweigh the benefits at this point. Definitely not for children, and we are saying not even for elderly at this point, that we have steps and procedures we could take, like early treatment, blah, 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 nasopharyngeal oral washes, all of these different steps so that, Dr. Madine said today, just now, this are complicated. Yeah, it is complicated because we made it complicated. Right now we have data that beginning to show us, shockingly, but we expected it, that this virus did not start in February 2020 or December 2019. We have data right now that I am in different groups. We're discussing it because we're seeing it. We have to figure out how to come to the public because it's very stunning that we had cases in March of 2019. I need you to understand what I just said. If March 2019, then you're looking at fall of 2018. So we're beginning to understand that we weren't told the truth from the beginning. It is a potential now that we're beginning to understand that this virus was circulating way before when we began to deal with it in January, February, March of 2020. And that raises a host of complications because it is potentially then that a large segment of the population was already had some level of immunity. Our immune systems had seen it, etc. So it raises the question as to why did we lock down the way we did? Not only that, the data accumulated very quickly that the lockdowns were harming people, the collateral effects of the lockdown. So why did governments harden the lockdown and prolong the lockdowns? And it's very simple that if you lock a society down, you see, theoretically, conceivably, I could say if the three of you are sitting in that room where you are right now, today, and there's a pathogen outside of that room with a 50% mortality, and I say, guys, this thing now come on the outside, we're going to have to seal you in this room for a bit. We could theoretically do that and vacuum seal you in there so that on the outside can't come on the inside. Here's the problem. That on the outside going to respond to that pressure, that selective pressure that you're placing on it, because the virus wants to infect you. So it will. We underestimated the evolutionary capacity of this virus to evolve and adapt to anything, any societal strictures you place on it. Number one, if I kept you in that room for as long as possible until thinking that virus will burn out, by the time you emerge, there'll be no society to emerge to. Number one, your economy will be gone. Everything will be destroyed. I mean, I'm talking about those people who tried the zero COVID madness. More importantly, by doing that, you have denied the three of you from becoming exposed naturally and harmlessly, and from you becoming infected naturally and harmlessly, and you building your own natural immunity. So when you emerge, you have nothing. And that's the problem. So locking a society down from a theoretical point of view, we know it could never work, but I'm just saying, let's play devil's advocate. You could potentially do it, but you will create more harm if you did that and you tried that approach. And the lockdown open up, that is even more nonsensical and more devastating. So the right thing that we should have done from the beginning was adopt a targeted, age-stratified approach, because we knew, I know Dr. Madine and Dr. Shiram knew, 3 weeks out of the gate that COVID was amenable to risk stratification. And we knew that your baseline risk was prognostic on the severity and your mortality. So we knew that there was a strong age risk curve where 85-year-old granny had a 1,000-fold increased risk of death than 10-year-old Johnny. But the complexity of this, though, Philip, is there's so much individual differences. And like as Dr. Shiram said, he's dealt with young people who struggle too. So, but the issue is the policies and the programs that were used function to harm the society more. And today, nobody wants to trust any doctors. So if we really have a Nipah virus or a Rift Valley virus or a Marburg to come through Trinidad or the Caribbean now, we're going to have a lot of problems unless you use military force or the police. People are not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen because they have seen and they're reading on the internet all of these things that were done failed. They failed. And the point of view is this. The median age of death today is about 82 or 83 still. This is in Canada and America. I'm not sure about Trinidad. The average life expectancy in Canada and America is 79. So from a thinking individual, that means COVID kills beyond life expectancy. So that's a very important consideration. That means COVID didn't cut lives short. So you have to look at it from that point. What exactly were we dealing with here? So I'll hand it back.
I want to add something about what you're saying before you hand it back. Because, and I want to say, almost everything that you're saying now, you were saying way back in 2020. So you were giving
these guys, Dr. Shiram,
no,
I've been communicating with him.
Yeah. So then how is the public then to trust public health ever again?
We can't.
Because what he is saying is that we knew the media's job was to argue with us. That whole insanity about the pandemic of the unvaccinated, that whole nonsense that they were trying to sell us, that idea that you would need a vaccine passport, and if you don't have a vaccine passport, you can't come out. That is just, it seems as though, to me, raw politics here, that this virus was seized upon by governments who wanted to use it to have extra constitutional control.
Yeah, yep. Should I stick my big mouth in this point?
Jump right in.
I would absolutely agree with that. But I don't know if our Trinidad government and our Trinidadian public health people were necessarily party to that. They don't have, they may not, I don't think they had any big grandiose plans to control. But I think on a global scale, yes, I think that society, civilization is changing rapidly, and they're far bigger threats than COVID afoot. And yes, it is essential for many interests, in particular I don't know how to put this simply, but there are people who feel that centralization of power on the planet is essential for humanity's survival and well-being, and they try to gather it, and they use this using vast amounts of money. So organizations like the World Health Organization, the Food and Drugs Administration in the States, and possibly others, I don't know. The American government is basically owned, as far as I can see, by the corporates, the pharmaceutical and the whole corporate. So basically,
so let's bring it to this. Bring it to this, right? Because you are speaking.
Hang on a second. Well, to me, when I hear something coming out of the U.S. government, which is one of the major funders of the WHO, right? I assume that it's Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical corporations, talking. I don't believe that they have any mind independent of them. But the World Health Organization itself now, their funding is largely through the US government and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as Gavi, which is heavily owned by Bill Gates. So Bill Gates is actually a critical part of the funding of the WHO. If he were to withdraw his funding, they would have very, very big problems. So essentially what we have is, if I hear the WHO talking, I am assuming that it is Bill Gates talking and the US government talking. So just that's how I see things.
Yeah,
so,
but you see, and this is important, right? We can't, when we're thought leaders, when we're trying to get people in a situation, because this is what's facing us, and this is what I was going to say just now, is that you are now going to challenge people on a cognitive dissonance level, where they now have to look at established institutions that they're supposed to trust, like government and media and public health. And they're supposed to be able to take what they're saying. And it turns out now that all of the conspiracy theorists, that's what they were trying to label us as, were the ones that were giving the correct information. If there is no prosecution of those who were guilty of overreach, if there is no prosecution, we as a society will not be able to function beyond this.
But you have a lot of faith in these public institutions and the procedures that both of you, Rajiv also, but I don't think that trying to prosecute, look at every administration when they change government in the States and in Trinidad tried to prosecute the last administration with the stupidness they did. Has it ever come, it just spends a whole lot of public money and gets nowhere. I would say but just try to, people have to just try to educate themselves.
No, but that's anarchy. And we need to be careful, because we can't advocate for anarchy. We have to say that, what is the statement? Government is necessary because people left to their own devices will do wrong, but now government is doing wrong. So what you need to take away from this? You need to action. You need an action item. You need to bring this to a close. After World War II, there was Nuremberg, and there were trials, and they got to some measure of closure, whether it's 20%, 50%, it doesn't matter. But to the people looking on to go forward, to trust in institutions, so that when you drive up to a traffic light and you have green, the man coming the other way don't kill you. We want people to still trust in government, and those who are in government, who are guilty of overreach, who are guilty of using the pandemic for scaremongering and taking advantage of people, whether it is incompetence or deliberate, there should be prosecution. But like for the four divers, I just want to say this, like for the 4 divers who were left to die in that pipe, there is no amount of science, no amount of mental gymnastics that you can engage in that takes you away from the fact that they are supposed to be people in charge for situations like that. In our case, and you could tell me about the world, and my brother deals with the whole world, but in our case, in Trinidad, every single aspect of our government and public health failed, and then they turned around and gave themselves awards. Yeah. National awards.
Phillip, if you don't mind, if I could chime in on this a little bit, because I think I align with you. I align with both of you on this, right? That are we really going to get justice? But I don't think that we can exculpate, to me, the perpetrators of a management plan that, to me, actually enacted or put into play a segregation system. And I want you to remember the dates. The dates, October the 11th, 2021 to April the 4th, 2022. And I worked through this pandemic since May 2020. I've been seeing COVID patients, and I've had COVID on several occasions. I have natural immunity, and I didn't take the vaccine because I have natural immunity. I didn't take the vaccine because I have natural immunity, and I've helped. I've done my share to contribute to the care of patients, and it's been very rough. I can tell you that, right? Working on the front line. And I remember during the pandemic, if it's one thing, working in the Cuba environs, I always, during the pandemic, I was moved about and I supported businesses and so on. And I used to go to a restaurant regularly. And then on October the 11th, the government, under the clinical leadership of the Ministry of Health and the pandemic team, they put in place a system of segregation in this country, the safe zone segregation. And I went to that restaurant and I said, let me come as usual. I always went and I made sure and I buoyed the business during that time. And they asked me to show a vaccine pass. And I said, first of all, that's my medical information. Why do you need that? Right? He said, no, for you to come inside. I said, listen. So I spoke to the girl through the door. And I said, listen, I had COVID already. You know who I am. I'm a doctor in the community. You know who I am. I had COVID. I am immune. I'm not a threat to you or anything. Right? They said, you can't come inside. I said, so, but you can buy your meal, but she will pass it through the door. And she can take my credit card and she will go inside and scan my card. And I felt so ravaged by that. To me, it was a disgusting feeling that I would be excluded like a second-class citizen.
But you see, the problem is, she and the owner of the restaurant, while they know you, and this is the problem, this is what fractured the society, and this is the point I'm trying to make, they fractured the society, because she and they may have wanted to tell you, come inside, but when I went to visit Dr. Omar Dean, professionally, I just want to say this, West Shore had guards stop anybody who don't have on a mask, because the state passed a law in Trinidad that if you are in a hospital environment without a mask, you could be fined. Yes?
Right.
And that is the rule in every hospital tonight.
So I understand that. You want to keep your business running. I really understand that. But we needed to have the moral fortitude to say something is wrong there. We knew at that time, that would have been around December or so, 2021. We knew at that time, we had good evidence and we had experiential evidence, anecdotal evidence, that whether you took the vaccine or not, you can still contract the virus and transmit it. So why should I be treated as a plague-ridden person?
What do you think
or why should we? We needed to reject that outright. Now, I am not saying the business is to blame, I am saying that the policy.
This is the conundrum. You are not wrong. But this is the conundrum. That's where anarchy starts. Because we are actually saying here that the breakdown of law, order, and government started with those laws. Right now it is being continued by this latest law about if you go into a medical clinic or a hospital environment, if you're not wearing a mask, you're breaking a law. And my brother and you all are saying that there is enough scientific data to say wearing the mask is a foolish waste of time. You are going to fine people and charge people.
Yeah.
What are you saying the people should do?
No, but what
should we get in an argument with the security guard?
No.
But that's what I'm saying. How do we
Absolutely
fix it?
not.
How do the people fix it?
So the problem is that we had evidence. We had evidence that should have been privied and that was privied, that was presented to the decision makers, the medical board, right? We had evidence at the time showing that immunity was waning rapidly and that your efficacy against transmission went down to about 16% after about 4 or 5 months. Your efficacy against transmission after vaccination went down to that. Therefore, no person, regardless of your vaccination status, is more or less a threat to another based on vaccination status. And in fact, your vaccination status is your medical business. And you should not be revealed to anyone, not a non-medical person. Your vaccination status,
right, so
don't ask, don't tell.
Good.
So the question that I asked, seeing that this was presented to the medical board, why is it that the medical fraternity, the public health fraternity, continued to enforce the safe zone segregation program for 7 months when they knew that it didn't make any difference in transmission?
But it brings me the question again about the masks.
Yeah.
So what should we do now that the public knows that the state is wrong? The public knows that the state is wrong. It is a wrong law. what do? Do I go into the hospital without the mask and get charged and go into the court?
I have never worn a
argue
mask.
with the judge, because the judge now is going to be guided by the state's public health position. So the people are being the people are being victimized by the government and the state.
Yeah.
But I would like to say that it's not coming from the government and the state, it's coming from higher up, it's coming from directives from
we are sovereign nation.
Sovereign state.
We are sovereign state.
You really think it's sovereign?
We're not a sovereign state?
No, we just subject to
We don't.
Economy is totally dependent on it's controlled by forces way beyond our public health policy is controlled by. I was told by friends anyway. I don't know if, but when I was questioning why government did this and why government is doing that, they say, well, Carper and Paho say we have to do that, and they're not going to stand up to oppose. They just have to take, because they're dependent on funding from WHO. So I don't think they could just refuse to take.
But your mandate is to protect your citizens first and foremost. They work for us. The government works for the citizen, not for PAHO or WHO and so on.
And we don't vote PAHO.
They should work for us, but they don't.
I agree with that.
No, the reason I'm not interrupting that is because that's the conversation we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, have to have. I don't want us to become a political conversation. It's a medical conversation. But it's leading us into the realm of politics when we look at the fact that the state continues to fail what Dr. Seram is saying. They have a responsibility, as you're fully well aware. They license you. They are responsible for the entire administration and medicine in this country. They are not doing what they should be doing, which is representing us.
But Doc, but there are many countries which did not enforce segregation and so on like this. There are many countries that didn't, right?
Yeah, notably Sweden. No, Sweden. If you look at the statistics for Sweden, it's very interesting because Sweden had the minimal amount of lockdowns and mandates and restrictions. They kept it an absolute bare minimum, and they were heavily criticized for this. And after 3 years, they published the data now, what we call excess mortality for 2020 and 2021. And Sweden's excess mortality is only 4.4%, whereas many European countries have excess mortality of like 16+%. So Sweden actually, of all European countries concerned in the total excess mortality during those years, Sweden did the best. So I think they've been vindicated now. So, I mean, this would go with in retrospect, it seems like you were right. And I think what Paul was saying, he's implying that none of the mandates, none of the measures taken worked, you know. I ain't sure about the vaccines, or they might be sure about the vaccine, but
when is it sure?
I don't know if you all may think that the vaccines may have caused more harm than good. I don't know. But I could tell you all the other measures taken, it seems to, I would agree with you all, because I think Paul just said so. They've really not helped, and we can see the evidence, you know, in the countries that have taken different paths.
Well, I mean, if you want to just look at a very unusual case, which is China. China was so stringent in enforcing its social distancing policy, right? So the question is, if we were to lock everybody away from each other, could we stop the spread of COVID? Well, yeah, obviously. If you lock everybody down indefinitely, nothing will spread. The problem is that you just kick the can down the road. Nobody knows what's going on in China. They have a massive outbreak, whereas the whole world is now escaping and they're walking out of COVID. They're now entering it. And of course, we have no insight into their data. China never has to report to the WHO. Throughout the pandemic in the Johns Hopkins database, there's no information on China, right? So they kick the can down the road and they're still facing the same thing. What we faced 2 years ago, China has to face that now. So just basic common sense, the basic logic would say that eventually we have to mix, we have to mingle. That is going to be part and parcel of obtaining robust, natural herd immunity.
You know what was instructive? We were all following this website that had all of the statistical data updated daily. I can't remember the name right
Our
now.
World in Data?
Yeah, something like that.
That's John Hopkins. That's John Hopkins.
No. There was
another one.
There was a private that just have all the numbers for everything. The world was following it, and in the list of countries, one of the inventory items was a ship, a cruise ship. I think it was called the Sapphire Princess or something like that.
Yeah.
That was one of the first entire lockdown, closed environment, COVID situations. And you had numbers there. That was a perfect example for you to use. And I remember Paul was talking about that. That a woman sharing a cabin with her husband, he got COVID and died, she never got it.
Mm-hmm.
And that the same percentages that manifested across societies manifested on that cruise ship.
Yeah.
We had numbers early. And my problem today, and I really appreciate you all speaking out. I mean, Dr. Siram, you deserve a national award. And I say that to you because I've respected the fact and I know how easy this country victimizes people. So for you to take the stance that you took was really encouraging to me. Every time I think that my country's failed, someone like you steps up. I have a situation now where I would advise that we take the government before the court. Mm-hmm. But the court is going to be guided by the government, by the state's public health. Who does the people turn to when the government is the problem?
You see, what the court will say, the court will say, listen, the government has before it a choice of getting the best consultant, the best professional to advise them, right? The politician cannot make medical public health decisions. Their decision is to get the most qualified person to make those decisions, to advise them. So, and the state can say that they have. The state can say that, yeah, we got the best qualified people to advise them. We got the experts at WHO and so on. The problem is that, as Dr. Omar Dean mentioned, is that
they get Bill Gates to advise them, which is heavily invested.
This is the problem. This is the problem.
So now our local court, and you said that we're not actually as sovereign as we think. Our local court is actually being guided by the dictates of global health policies. And those policies were not only wrong, they are being seen to have been deliberately wrong, almost manipulated. Where do we as a people stand now where that is concerned? Again, next crisis that befalls us, what happens?
Yeah, that's the thing, and the next crisis is going to come at some point. So, you know, I had asked a couple of years ago, one of my friends, let's call him a friend, was a justice in let's say an international organization. I don't want to bring it.
Different jurisdiction.
Yeah, he worked internationally in designing policy and so on. So I asked him, can governments mandate that we get vaccinated? You know, is there a legal? He said yes, as long as the you are a threat to other people, then yes, they certainly can mandate you get vaccinated. So I said, but how do they know that I'm a threat to other people? They are completely dependent on information given to them. And the information is silly. And whoever controls information, no, the problem in the world today is who controls information. So as long as you control the information given to these judges, they can approve anything they want. You know, they could support governments in injecting 1-year-old children, you know, if they want.
And that's the problem. Life imitated art so well during 2021, 22. I don't know if you ever saw the show V for Vendetta. You should
It's
look
on my
at
watch
that
list.
show.
Yeah.
The entire show, the premise of the show was state taking control because of a virus called the St. Mary's virus. And that they were manipulating data to suit themselves.
Well, they've absolutely done that here. Data has been heavily manipulated, and basically for some sort of I can't tell you exactly why, but it seemed essential to people in control that data be heavily manipulated. And doctors don't seem to, the average doctor, in fact the vast majority of doctors, don't seem to have the simple wherewithal to even question this data that's given to them. So basically doctors just accept the narrative, just like, in fact I don't find doctors are any more sensible than the average patient in terms of questioning, raising the antenna. Is something wrong? Is this making sense? Is this common sense? Doctors have not been able to think critically and think independently, and even get up and say, I want to go and read some data. I want to read some research. No, they read the newspaper and they read what the WHO say and what the government say, the WHO say, and that is apparently gospel for them, and they act like that.
But also, your reputation and your brand, as strong as it is, I watched Dr. Bratt. He started to write, and I was so relieved that somebody as strong as him, but I was also worried because I know the country that I live in, and I know how easily the herd could have turned on Dr. Siriram or Dr. Bratt or anybody else who was speaking up at the time. And that's where the fear comes in. That you could be somebody who are professional and you understand and you're seeing, but you're afraid to speak.
Yeah, well, about
as a professional.
About 50% of the doctors, correct me if I'm wrong, in Trinidad actually work for the government or university or something. So they have their jobs to think about. And I know actually, I can think offhand of about 3 or 4 doctors who think just like us, but they won't say a word. They say, well, no, I work, my job would be in jeopardy. Of course, I can't say anything like that. Listen, the question about myocarditis Paul said that one kid has died or something like that in the States from COVID. Okay. You realize that no one could get information about children in COVID in Trinidad. How many cases we had, how many children died, what did they really die from? Was it their leukemia or was it their renal failure or something,
Yeah.
And when my friends try to ask the Cora, the doctors who work in the COVID center down at Cuba, right? The Cuba doctors apparently were under a kind of gag order and would refuse to say anything. They say, listen, we can't say anything about this because we lose our job. This is what I'm told anyway. I don't know if it's true, but this is what I'm told.
This cannot be allowed to go unexamined. It cannot. And maybe this is what we need a commission of inquiry into, our handling of this pandemic. Because the state made some glaring errors, and we need to find out if they were deliberate, if people benefited financially, if there were political objectives.
On a global scale, people benefited tremendously financially. There's a question somewhere between $1 and $5 trillion US dollars migrated from the lower and middle income people to the upper income people. So yes, people benefited tremendously from what happened over the past 3 years. But I don't know if in Trinidad specifically there's malevolence and greed that drove this. I think it's just trying to follow what the gods abroad who
Dr. Manning, I wanna agree with you up to a point. When you get power outside of the law, when you could write your own rules and not be challenged, the COVID, public health ordinance number 34, January 31st, 2020, that spoke all of this extra power into the hands of the state. That has not been repealed as yet. That still exists. We're still under that health ordinance. The country has found itself in a place where all of us are trying to accept that the state is right and wrong at the same time, and that we are powerful and powerless at the same time. And I don't understand how that state could continue to exist and there not be tragic consequences.
Well, if you compare with Australia, where it was really terrible, and New Zealand, ridiculous enforcement measures there, we didn't do too badly. I mean, globally, compare us. You all are upset by the emergency powers and the powers assumed that have been assumed now by governments and public health people. But on compared to the rest of the planet, the rest of the world, are we about average or not?
No, we've been pretty bad.
Really?
If you look at, well, it depends on what measures you're looking at, right? In Trinidad and Tobago, you have to apply to protest. You have to apply to the police to protest. Internationally, people have been protesting. If you look at Europe and so on, they have been protesting against these measures. When we try to protest, they try to marshal us. I remember they tried to spritz us out, all kinds of nonsense. There's no data to suggest that mass congregations in the outdoors causes any outbreak. That's why I said carnival is not such a... There's no data to suggest that.
The candlelight movement, our movement, that was created out of the uproar over Andre Barrett's death, that movement was becoming a massive movement. And every 4 weeks, the lockdown that took place in this country, the state of emergency, that was enacted to shut the candlelight movement down. Our San Fernando meeting was expected to draw 10,000 people. People knew that every one of the meetings was getting larger and larger. And the San Fernando meeting, when Satish and the team turned on the speakers, truckloads of police showed up. So y'all cannot have this meeting. At the same time, there was a car show down the road in C3, thousands of people. And that weekend, if you remember, the media broadcast and covered thousands of children in Movie Town in Port of Spain. It was so much, it was ridiculous, and there was no enforcement, there was a lot of drama. But candlelight movement, our events were shut down. So what he's telling you is what I want to tell you. That they used this for political power and they used it for economic advantage. COVID-19 in Trinidad destroyed the middle class. We don't have the numbers because, as he said, it's difficult to get those numbers. But the vast majority of people who were middle class before in this country now are working poor. You go on real estate websites, and you will see houses that you never thought would ever come up for sale in your life as people just trying to flee. Trinidad and Tobago. Those things happened here, and it can't just be swept under the rug in the name of we were handling a pandemic.
Yeah. No, but I mean, if you look at it, there are some other things. So that public health ordinance supersedes your constitutional rights. Your right to freedom of movement, religious suppression as well. I remember at a time there was a period of overlap when they said you can congregate, I think for 1 hour in church. You can correct me, we'll check it again. You can congregate for a truncated period, I think at half capacity, but gambling houses and so on, they were allowed to operate for a longer period of time. Okay? All of this is just decreased out of the public health ordinance. Just decreased.
The Hindus were unable
That's right.
to deal with their dead, to burn their dead. They couldn't.
What is the scientific basis of that? Do you have any evidence? Do you have any evidence?
It's arbitrary.
It's just arbitrary.
They were doing
It's
what
just
they wanted because
arbitrary.
they could. And if COVID didn't end, I remember when Omicron came out, there was this mad panic. Well, the sky falling now, South Africa. And if it wasn't for people like Dr. Paul Alexander, I remember that. And a doctor from South Africa who said, hey, calm down. This one is the least of them. So don't panic. I remember they were going to turn the screws, that Omicron was going to be so much more contagious and so much more deadly, that it was going to kill so many more people. We cannot let what happened here go unexamined, because it will happen again.
Okay, taken. Everything you say, I understand. Thanks, I've learned from it. But if you want to prevent this happening again, you have to have some input. You have to do it through control of information. I don't think legislation and taking people to court and so, I mean, taking governments to court, you might get public attention, which is what a lever, as you say, to get public attention, which is good, and it'll educate people. But you need to control information. So how do you do that? I knew Omicron was. Sorry, Omicron came here. Some woman brought Omicron on a plane, is it?
Yes.
And
right.
Who the hardware?
It's very.
Somebody to do the hardware, some craziness like that. Yes, I remember.
There's some prominent Trinidad
Yes.
people were saying, lawyers were saying in the papers that this woman should be charged for manslaughter. I talked to my friend, a doctor, the next day, and he said the woman should be given a medal, because we expect the Omicron to come in and naturally sort of vaccinate in a benign way everybody. It's a benign disease, you know. So we should have been grateful that she brought Omicron into the country.
Israel Khan. And I'm remembering these things now as we're talking. Israel Khan, who wanted to be president of the Republic, wanted to jail parents for protecting their children.
Yeah.
Wanted to jail parents. No, but Dr. Madin, you have to understand.
Can we blame Israel Khan? The man is a lawyer. What does he know about vaccination?
No, that's not it. That's not it.
But don't pontificate on things that you don't know about.
Imagine if his opinion had carried.
Yeah.
Imagine if his opinion had carried. I wanted Stephen Matheson here. Stephen Matheson and Paul Alexander on a live show with me. Stephen Matheson told the public servants in the country, when Faris Al-Rawi as Attorney General was telling the public servants that you all are going to have to get vaccinated or you will abandon your job. And Stephen Matheson calculated for every public servant on the air, for the government to hear, how much money you're all going to get. That he does not have that authority, and that this doesn't come under that. And were it not for that, and were it not for information again from Paul and Dr. Siram and others who were standing up, I wonder where this country would have ended up. These people were doing what they wanted. If Israel Khan had gotten his way, we would have had to die for our children. That's where it got up. Parents were talking about, I am going to die for my children. You are not vaccinating my child. And Israel Khan now should be charged for speaking stupidness. There should be a charge for that. We had people like him who know nothing about medicine, nothing about viruses, arguing and getting media time ahead of people like Paul, who's an epidemiologist and he understands this thing and is trying to tell the world this is how it works. And somebody said the other day, every single thing that he said, as he said it, happened. So we knew that there were people that we could have listened to. They now had a track record.
Yeah, they definitely have a track record. I agree with you. Everything but Paul said, everything he said so far in the program, has come true. The Great Barrington Declaration, I think that has proven to be pretty accurate.
Basically, some good principles to have. Yeah,
it wasn't, maybe not, but we can't get everything right, but I think in broadly,
government cannot be allowed to have this kind of power.
No, but
I am very sorry. Government cannot be allowed. There must be, from the moment that you think that an emergency is coming, the Constitution must allow for a system that protects from the government taking advantage of that emergency. Because that's what happened. Our government took advantage of an emergency. And the complicit media in Trinidad and Tobago that has to sing for its supper will do everything the government tells them to say, and say everything that the government tells them to say, and lead the people astray.
But the same thing is so in the United States, and
but this
perhaps the same thing is so in Britain too. I mean,
this is why in the United States and Britain they are fighting back, and it is our duty to do the same here, right? You know, when it came, we're talking about overreach and abuse of power, right? And I want to emphasize this. what was done to our children here, to me, we, the public health apparatus, and as a society as a whole, we are guilty of child abuse. Agreed. Abusing children.
Agreed.
I cannot believe, and
parents who lined up and had their children vaccinated.
So this was a part of this document that I contributed to. If you look at the data in here, you will see that in Trinidad and Tobago, if you look at the UK closed its schools for about, I think, 16 weeks. Let me check it back here. But we closed our schools for 26 weeks, fully closed. But if you look at the UK as well, during the period of 2020, the first quarter to the first quarter of 2022, they were fully open for 55 weeks, whereas we were only fully open for 8 weeks. Closure of in-person schooling on children. Now we have one of the longest school closures in the world. Closure of in-person schooling.
Yeah, parents had to go around the savannah.
It was really terrible.
What have we done to our children? And what is the importance of schooling, not just for education, but to be in a safe environment for 2 years, to be in a safe environment where you have access to the school feeding program, where you have access to healthy socialization, you have access to sports and so on. What have we done to our children in this country?
But you know, Rajiv, a lot of pediatricians got their children vaccinated. A lot of them were glad for this. They apparently support the school closures. If the pediatricians ain't going to read and try to make some independent analysis of the thing and just then who is it?
But why these same pediatricians, they could have call your friends in the UK and ask, hey, what are you guys doing? How come you all open schools since 2021 and there's no masking in schools? How come if you go to the schools here in Trinidad, they keep getting messages from the Ministry of Health, Omicron coming, put on masks and all these kids? Even though we have data that's showing us that. So why are the pediatricians not calling their colleagues internationally and finding out what is going on?
The takeaway from this, I think a lot of people, lawyers, so okay, we just clout up Israel can a little bit, but lawyers need to understand that they have a duty to protect against governmental overreach, not to help enforce it. Doctors, the whole medical fraternity, need to do some introspection about how they handle this and how they allow themselves to be manipulated, because doctors are the great advisors to the rest of us.
Well, I used to think we should be, but apparently we're not. The same pediatricians that go and get all the children vaccinated, and we tend to get a little emotional about it.
We still have Paul with us?
But I have to... I have to agree though, this very prolonged school closure was really terrible. It was bizarre.
Yeah.
It was just weird. Why did they do this?
But there's no evidence based.
I used to host this.
What was protecting the public? What? Nothing. Nothing was protecting the public. All the questions you're asking now, people were asking then. What was there to protect the public? And I think about the public servants, and I think about the children. All the rest of the people who had to vaccinate to operate, and the Citizens Union of Trinidad and Tobago and Ian Griffin, I want to give him a round of applause. Ian Griffin got a settlement for an employee of a pest control company whose job it was to go in people's yards and pick up rat traps and put down rat traps. And because he didn't want to get vaccinated, his superiors would roster him, because companies where he never interacted with people still didn't want him on the compound. What was there to protect? If little organizations like ours didn't step up, if Rajiv Siriraman, and I know you got a lot of help from this guy Umar Abdullah, he marched with you all and he supported the work that you were doing. If it wasn't for people, and I have to acknowledge all these people, I have to acknowledge all the people who had risked to themselves, but what I want to come out of this is that there be some measure put in place so that the state cannot exert unilateral extra constitutional power and write laws as it wants in the name of an emergency. They need to be continuously making the case to justify that power. That's what the parliament is for. Put those things to work. Because if we don't do that, their message from this is how easily they got away with this.
And you know, Philip, they continue to get away with it because there are many companies that continue prejudicial hiring practices. Many companies. They are enforcing, even though we know that the current batch of vaccines have no impact on Omicron. Omicron in itself has a very, very low mortality risk. Okay? So the current batch of vaccines don't work well, especially with XBB5, which is totally vaccine evasive. Right? But you are being enforced to take a vaccine and to show a vaccine card in order for you to qualify for a job interview. And that is happening right now still. So the fight is still on many fronts. And I think that the strategy here is to wear people out. Now the question is, why is it that they were so they were so abusive to the children in this country?
Yeah,
why is it? Well, I can tell you, I feel that they were very dissatisfied with the uptake. And the vaccines had come out, and I think that maybe there was this sense, once there's this looming danger on children all the time, maybe there was a sense, and I got it from teachers, that when the children got vaccinated, then they can come out. So to me, I felt as if, I wondered if it was a strategy to maintain demand for vaccines. I just wonder. I don't know. I can't confirm that. But is it that 50% is not enough? Because generally speaking, they try to reach a 70% uptake internationally.
We don't even know what we paid for our vaccines. We don't know if we bought our vaccines through second-hand and third-hand dealers. And I mean, these are the things that take place in Trinidad. And I know I sound cynical when I speak, but this has been the practice of government after government in this country since we've become independent. That people use every opportunity to further their own interests at the advantage of everybody else. We don't even know because they signed a non-disclosure agreement for the price of the vaccines we pay.
There's no only Trinidad, I think, yeah. An interesting thing is that India stood up to Pfizer when it came to this, what's the word, the
Indemnification. Yeah.
They refused to accept the Pfizer vaccine. I really have to respect the
yeah. You remember they threw out the WHO chief scientist as well. India threw out Subramaniam.
Yeah, they tried to. I don't know if it.
Well, they charged her. I think they brought a case against her.
So let's talk about other things.
Well, no, cutting across here.
No.
So your all the idea is work through legislation. You all want a civil society. You want a real structured, sensible, democratic society. Good luck. But I think let's work through information, right? So if we tell people, can I just tell the audience something? This is just to give you a little sense for right now what's happening with COVID. It may not be this new variant you talk about. It might be an earlier Omicron strain. But this is based on the UK Health Security Agency presentation to the JCVI, that's the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization, 25th October 22, right? What is the variants right now are so benign that if you want to, so there's a question of numbers needed to treat or numbers needed to vaccinate to prevent one hospitalization or one death, or you're going to have to vaccinate and treat, to vaccinate vast amounts of people to prevent one person going into hospital. So let's say that let's take the over 70 age group. You're going to have to vaccinate 800 people to prevent hospitalization, but you're going to have to vaccinate 7,000 plus of those people to prevent a serious hospitalization that requires oxygen administration. So even in the highest risk old people, I'm soon going to be there, right? You have to vaccinate 7,500 people to prevent one illness that is going to require oxygen. In the 60 to 69 years old, currently, this is in the UK, you know, you're going to have to vaccinate 27,000 people with a booster disease, or to prevent one case of serious illness that requires oxygen or ventilation. In the 50 to 59-year-old group, you're talking in the order of between 18,000 and 256,000 people need to be vaccinated, depending on how much risk you have. In the 20 to 29 years, this is young people, if you have no risk factors, you're going to have to vaccinate 700,000 people in the 20 to 29-year-old healthy group to prevent one hospitalization that requires oxygen or ventilation. If they are higher risk in young people, higher risk under 30%, you might have to vaccinate 60,000 people to prevent one. But essentially, you have to vaccinate vast amounts of people to prevent one hospitalization that needs oxygen. This is not. This is hard data from the UK. And you all seem to want data from Trinidad, but all you have to remember, collection of data requires vast infrastructure and a whole lot of work and, you know, money and time and stuff. Few countries in the world give us sensible. Israel give us sensible data.
Dr.
Maybe.
We spend $5 billion every year on public health, Trinidad, and for COVID we spent another $10 billion. I remember there was a time, and you're helping me remember stuff, when we're talking hospitalization, when every time there was a address by these people who were the awardees, I remember the panic about, we had 90%, we had 92%, we had 98% of beds. And I had to go and do my own research and file it and come and tell the public, you know, we have 60 beds in the whole country, and that 4 of them are non-functional. And then the Prime Minister responded and said, it's not so easy to get a bed. You can't go PriceSmart and pick up a ventilator and train staff and thing. And then 2 weeks later, he went PriceSmart and got it. Because they had to answer, and they had to go and get more beds, because I don't know where he got it. He said, he contradicted himself. But they were using information and manipulating the facts that you bring to the table, Dr. Sierra bring to the table. Those things were available to us. Why those things weren't guiding us?
I don't know if they were so available to us. Listen, this is not talking about the beginning of the pandemic when we all asked to get back. This is now, eh? So I just wanted to get this message across right now. Everybody, listen to me, because COVID is a benign disease. I didn't make this up. This is the UK Health Security Agency, which is about the most authoritative data you could get for Britain, and I have no reason to believe that Trinidad is any worse than Britain in terms of how dangerous the variants. You have to vaccinate vast amounts of people to prevent one, not even death, one hospitalization that needs oxygen. So I really, I should qualify, we're talking about the mRNA vaccines here. There's also a risk to the mRNA vaccines, which I would just like to touch on. And this risk, again, for lack of data, is Paul still on the thing?
No, he had to go to another show.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, this is why the very first question you asked me, I wanted to say that I just don't know the answer to it. But because we don't have the data isn't forthcoming, and the data that comes out of the medical is really confusing. But there is a significant risk to mRNA vaccination, and it is well established now that everybody, yes, it causes myocarditis, but it can also cause lots of other things. unfortunately, we do not really know how frequently these vaccines cause vaccine injury. I wish we knew, and 3 years into this pandemic and having vaccinated, used these mRNAs all over the world, really we should know, but we don't. All we know is they can cause a fair amount of serious adverse events, and a reanalysis of, you probably all know, reanalysis of Pfizer's own data suggests that it's probably 1 in 800 people who get an mRNA vaccine will have a serious adverse event, something that significantly affects the course of their life, at least temporarily, and hopefully, possibly even permanently. So this is a high number of people, 1 in 800. Vaccines, I just wanted to mention